So I guess there are a few ways we could start to talk about these next generation advanced language models. And one of them would be kind of world domination by algorithms. And that's one way of starting this conversation. But I think that's been done quite a bit. Another thing we can talk about is like the question of, is there such thing as self-aware AI? And that's a question we could ask. There's also a question my wife asks quite often, which is like, is there such thing as a self-aware developer? Also an interesting question. But for me, I think I'm going to start with a little bit of a personal, serious note. This is a photo of me at the time when they opened up for proposals for Python. And the reason this photo is kind of foggy is I'm nebulizing like medicine for post-COVID. And it's quite a metaphor because it's a foggy photo. And if you've had long COVID, my head was also like kind of foggy. And I really missed this kind of community event, but there was no way I could write a proposal or a summary for a proposal. So I had this moment of either extreme tired thinking or brilliance. If you ask me, it's brilliance. If you ask my wife, it's laziness. And I sort of opened up the playground for OpenAI and dumped, without following any best practices, actually probably worse practices, dumped a bunch of information like who is Ronnie Sheer, like about myself and about GPT-3, and a bunch of like questions for a proposal. And so I did that, and this is the screenshot just to prove to you. And I told it like, write an exciting description, 3 to 1,500 words, yada, yada. And right off the bat, it came up with this thing, which is like, are you interested in developing with GPT-3 using Python? Ronnie Sheer will be discussing how to do just that in the upcoming conference. So I decided to submit it. And then if I get in, I'll have to like learn how to use this thing to talk about it. And that's what I'll do today. So a little bit about myself. My name is Ronnie Sheer. I'm an instructor in LinkedIn Learning. I'm also a software architect in a small startup called Hiver. And I'm also a consultant. I'm going to do a little shameless plug. I do in-person workshops as well. I do like a Python crash course, Python for JavaScript ninjas or unicorns or unicorn ninjas, and like a Django crash course. And these are like real reviews about my courses, not generated by GPT-3. But that's like about it. You're not going to see any human stuff after this thing. As far as I know. I start to question my life now. Anyway, so when we talk about places where language models have so far aligned pretty well with human intent, I think translation is sort of a classic example. Like you can go to Google Translate and get a sense of what an article says in a language that you don't understand at all, right? And this has improved tremendously, right? And if you think about it, there's also summarization, tools that can let you consume a lot of text in less time. And this is actually picking up steam as well. As far as accessibility goes, we've had language technology like speech to text, text to speech. But these days, you also see like text to text stuff that is really changing people's lives. And if you see this sentence, like, that's one heck of a meal, for you, it may be a trivial sentence to understand. But from what I understand, there are people out there on spectrums that have a difficult time understanding subtleties like this. And so, translating it into, it's a very good meal can really make a difference for these people. And we see these tools growing out of this space, which is why it's important that we talk about things to make these tools work for us and kind of how we can bypass some of these fears. Finally, there is, efficiency tools. And if this were a talk about Copilot, we could talk about the ethics of training, a language model on all of open source. Gladly, it's not, so we don't have to. But if you've used Copilot, there's no doubt that it removes some of the tedious work from programming. And it lets you focus a bit more on higher level problems. That's not something I can dispute personally. We could talk endlessly about the ethics, and I'm actually quite interested. So if you want to talk after this talk. So Copilot is powered by GPT-3. GPT-3 is really well known, but it's not the only kid on the block. There are other algorithms that are doing pretty impressive things. GPT-3 being the big, publicity stunt superstar, but then, welcome. But then you have some algorithms like Jurassic by AI-21 Labs. And I'm not affiliated with AI-21 Labs, but they are, sponsors of this conference. So they deserve like a super shout out for supporting this community. And so big respect to them. There's also DALL-E, which is a creepy one. It takes sort of like any input you give it that's text and gives you like a creepy picture that's really realistic. And then you have like, oh, close the door. Yeah, either in or out. And then you have two kind of interesting ones. There is GPT-J, and that's a free and open to use implementation of some of these advanced language models. It's a bit more of a pain to deploy, but definitely it's great that the landscape has these open and free to use technologies. And then there's like DALL-E Mini, which is a big, if you like your time, don't look up DALL-E Mini. It's like a less capable version of DALL-E, but it's not less capable of producing endless fun if you give it weird things to draw for you. And just to demonstrate, I asked it to make a cake for the conference. So I said like a cake, the shape of the Python programming language logo, and it came up with this. On the first shot, I was like, get out of here. I was like, maybe this is Google Images. So I said like a stained glass, like you would see in a religious, chapel or something like this, of a dog eating a cake, the shape of the Python programming language logo, and it gave me these interesting implementations, which I definitely will not turn into NFTs, maybe, if I don't need them. Anyway, so these are the two clear winners, which is like one of them is like a dog smoking a cake, the shape of the Python programming language logo, and the other is like a dog praying to a distorted, like what's happened to our language? This is art, folks, and this is how I'm going to start making a living. No, I'm just kidding. So after the great success that I had writing a talk proposal, I said, hey, this is a unicorn startup, and it's time to come up with a product where you take that little interesting description of an open source technology from the docs, and you get a talk proposal, and you pay like $50,000. I mean, you guys would do it, right? So this is the requirements. It's like receive a brief description, like, Django is the greatest framework, secure, fast, yada, yada, and give me back in this exciting, full of examples talk. We'll be discussing Django, yada, yada, yada. So how would we implement this thing? So here we go. The first approach, and by the way, I should point out, if you're a data scientist, you're in the wrong room. I'm about to butcher your craft and say things that are probably less accurate. So you can leave, or you can pretend like I'm not butchering your craft. It's your choice, but no trolling yet. So the simple way of doing this would be there's the zero-shot approach and there's the few-shot approach. Zero-shot would be something like this. Would be like GPT-3 is a very capable language model, and just saying like, write me an exciting talk proposal for a tech conference, right? And GPT-3 can do that. Few shots would be to give like an example and a prompt, an example and a prompt. And just because folks from AI-21 Labs came in, I took an example from their documentation, which you'll see for few shot. I just did that on the fly, right? And here you'll see like an event. Christmas, tweet, oven broke in the last moment, no turkey, no problem, etc. Event, Valentine's Day, order her some or him, some roses from Schmaltz, blah, blah, blah. Event, summer sale, tweet, you get the gist. And then you say like, hey, event, Mother's Day, give me a tweet. And this really works. And in many cases, you can come up with these small examples and come up with really meaningful completion. So for this one, I did doc and talk. Doc, documentation, talk proposal. And so the first one is doc. Channels is a project that takes Django and extends its abilities, yada, yada. Talk, this example heavy, always example heavy. It will get your talk in. Talk, will show you everything you need, yada, yada. And I took a few more from colleagues that gave me permission to use this as sample data, right? So now we have these, and at the end, you say to it, hey, here's a doc, user input. What's the talk? We take this. Oh, by the way, if you have like a lot of completions you need, there is something called fine-tuning in OpenAI. It's also available in some of the models in AI 21 labs. Here you can put like over 100 parameters for really getting more meaningful stuff, but you'll be surprised at how well you can do with little to no inputs. So, you know, simple is better than complex. We open up a prompt. Unless you are me, I had to bleach it. I'm the only user of this application, but I had to bleach it. I was really paranoid about myself injecting bad code to this. And so basically, we interpret the prompt and the clean text, and we say, what's the talk algorithm? Then we do this, and I used Fast API because my life was too simple at the moment. I kind of said that the response is this. OpenAI wraps, I guess, HTTP in Python. And here you can specify which model you want to run. And they encourage you to start with a kind of heavy guns model, but then work your way into like something smaller so that you don't use as many resources, cheaper for you, better for your environment, environmental impact, different talk, different time. We can talk about it. Then there's like our little prompt, and there's temperature. And this is really interesting. What's temperature? Once again, data scientists, not your track, okay? So if I was to say this sentence, right? I like to eat cereal for, in all likelihood, the next word would be, this is audience participation, I know it's after lunch, would be like breakfast, right? But there's a small chance I will say lunch, or my, or next line, which is always a chance I'll say, right? Now, if I up the temperature, it means like, if I go with temperature 0, I will get the most likely. If I go with the higher temperature, closer to 1, it means sometimes you can go with something that's less likely. And this impacts or kind of affects two things mainly, the way I see it. One is predictability, right? 0 will usually map the same input to the same output. The other philosophy here, creativity. Because when you go with unlikely things, a lot of times you get more creative output. Now, once again, creativity when it comes to algorithm, another talk, another time, really interesting stuff, right? So, this is my shout out to our great sponsors, AI 21 Labs, who also have pretty capable APIs as well. And you'll see very similar inputs, right? You see prompt and temperature, and you choose, in this case, you have to do the excruciating hard work of making the HTTP call yourself, but very similar stuff. The temperature you might have to play around with to see what works with the amount of inputs that you've put. So after some 20 hours of front-end perfection, we had our unicorn, and it's time to show you what we got. This is the OpenAI one, and as you can see, this is Docs to Talks, the unicorn app that leverages AI to generate talk proposals. And just not to offend people, I invented sort of like a fictitious framework here. So the input is Rockstar is the first and only cloud-native framework that leverages AI to make you sound cool. and make me a conference Rockstar. And you'll see like, this talk will introduce you to Rockstar, the first and only cloud native framework that leverages yada yada. You'll learn about the benefits of using Rockstar and how it can help you sound cooler than you ever thought possible. Not bad, right? For like a few samples of training. So next, there are our friends at AI21 Labs, which, as you'll see, have produced very similar results. So Rockstar is the first and only cloud-native framework that leverages AI to make you sound cool. And pretty quickly, this talk will introduce you to Rockstar, the first and only cloud-native framework that leverages AI to make you sound cool. You'll learn about the benefits of using Rockstar and how it can help you manage your resources more efficiently. So definitely more than one player out there. Very capable, which is great because it was starting to get to a point where you had to get certain approvals from certain companies to use their models, and now you have companies that are a little bit more open about usage. So I guess as far as gatekeeping goes, you'll hear a lot of this stuff, like the very official one is like, have a human in the loop, or you should probably go over this stuff, which you probably should have somebody go over something convincing that is put out to the world. Because I think, when we talk about, sentient AI, that's one thing, but I do think there are dangers that are being overlooked. And the things that kind of scare me a bit is like, if we have people paid to write all this like nonsense online, what happens when you can do this on scale? What happens when you can write a ton of convincing sounding fake news 24/7, pumping social media full of nonsense? I think this can have an effect if we don't watch out slightly. There's also manipulation. These models can probably pick up on what language structures certain people respond to. I don't want to give anyone ideas, but I think that's a very, it can kind of write to your taste and perhaps manipulate. And finally, and this is something that I'm not sure if everyone agrees on, like we have BS detectors that use kind of quality of writing as a means of knowing if something is worth double checking, perhaps. And since this can produce quality, authoritative sounding stuff, I guess it empowers people, and it could empower the wrong people. So I do feel like we're losing a critical thinking filter, in a sense, with some of these really advanced grammar enhancement tools that are out there. So at this point, I should mention that there are definitely some great potentials. And I think helping people express themselves, whether it's people dealing with long COVID or people dealing with chronic issues that make it difficult for them to express themselves, is a big one. Or helping people understand subtleties that are difficult for some people to understand. And I think that with efficiency tools, whether it's Copilot or grammar helpers, it's also focusing on more high-level stuff. As opposed to the nuances of grammar or things like that. So at this point, I would like to open it up to questions. Anybody?
How do we evaluate how good a completion is?
That's actually a great question. So I think that there's this company that has a product called WordTune, for instance. No, I'm really not affiliated by these guys, but I think a lot of tooling can do that in the design of the tool itself, right? So, for example, WordTune, it gives you suggestions, but you have to opt in. Copilot gives you suggestions, and I have a friend who described Copilot, I think, the best description I've heard. It's like a drunk developer trying to wing it, and a lot of times, yeah, you have to go through it and not just. You have to make sure that it works for you and opt into these completions. I don't think it's a good idea to have something where a journalist writes a bunch of bullet points and just hits publish on a completion, perhaps. So I guess when it comes down to this, a lot of times you'll hear the word like human intent. Like once we solve human intent, we'll have this collaborative intelligence, which is humans working alongside of AI to make things better. And I guess this is a loaded kind of statement, but I think more importantly, we need to have like good human intent working together with AI perhaps in order to make sure that we do the right things with it. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.